Okay, folks, we are going to get started. I'll try to keep these meetings as best on schedule because I know people's time's precious. I'd first of all like to welcome everyone to the first meeting of the reopening Free Lake Regional Task Force. I would first of all like to thank all of you for participating and everyone that submitted letters of interest. I think I indicated we had over 66 letters of interest for this important endeavor. I tried to select 24, 25, including myself, stakeholders that will hopefully accurately represent our community moving forward. Please know that I originally scheduled this meeting over 1 month ago based on some preliminary information that indicated the state guidelines would be available last week. That didn't happen, but the good news is the state roadmap and guidance is coming out this week, led by a press conference from Governor Baker, followed up by a detailed document from the Commissioner of Education, Jeff Riley, and that should happen possibly as early as tomorrow. Having said that, I think it's important for this group to know it would be a little premature for our district to begin until we have that critical state guidance. Having said that, please know the district, in creating this task force, along with already beginning the process to secure necessary PPE, is prepared for the planning phase over the next 2 months leading up to the start of school in the fall. I chose to kind of keep the meeting as a kickstart the process and give an overview of kind of where we are today. I'm confident with the state guidelines rolling out this week, we can make a safe and smooth transition back to school in the fall. And I know certainly that many in the community that have reached out to you individually and me have some real concerns and are real anxious about kind of where we're at. But I'm real confident with the group that we have selected that we can walk them through and guide them through the process. So the first thing I'm going to do is just recognize the individual members that are present here. As you can see, I won't go into detail. I won't put you on the spot and ask you to do an intro, but what I try to do is have a representative group of all the stakeholders, right? You see Mary Abreu, Sherry Barron, these are alphabetical, Lisa Ballard, Joan Bullock, Jim Cabusio, Erica Cummings, Laurie Damaris, Ann Davis, Andrea Fay, Robert Flaherty, Shauna Fontaine, Sarah Gilbert, Paul George, Greg Goodwin, Derek Grasha, Celeste Miseladakis, Mary Beth Moore, Paula Mueller, Kenny Resendiz, Dan Rutledge, Aaron Steele, Renee Vitale, and Mike Ward. Myself being the 25th individual as part of this task force. Again, trying to represent not only the organization of the Freetown-Lakeville Regional School District, but parents in each of the schools, teaching staff, food service, transportation, and it did mirror the state task force that was put together to develop their guidelines. Calendar for meetings, we're having our kickoff meeting today. Should be a relatively brief meeting. And then our next meeting is tentatively scheduled for next Monday at 3 o'clock. It's scheduled to be remote. We can have some conversation about that as a group. To be determined where we look at July and August, and obviously the first day of school. We already have our school calendar up, the traditional calendar, and that may be dictated and changed based on some decisions that we have to make and what the state guidance comes out looking like. But again, I wanted to make sure that we met before the close of school because I do know parents and family members and businesses are extremely anxious about kind of where we're at as it relates to the first steps in the process. So when you look at kind of the mission or the purpose of this task force, it's a guiding group, right? It's not making the final determination. I know I've received some emails from parents concerned about my decision. It certainly won't be my decision alone in relation. We're going to look at a comprehensive plan. We're going to prepare for that plan. We're going to implement it and hopefully communicate it properly. And I think that may be the greatest vehicle that this task force holds for stakeholders, is making sure that everybody in Freetown and Lakeville clearly knows and we articulate what we're doing both at all 5 schools and as it relates to the district to be sure that we have a safe return for all our kids in the fall. And that's certainly the motivating factor behind it. We're going to break down the large group. We have 25 individuals into three subgroups, so 3 working groups, and those groups consistent with what the state grouping looked like. We'll focus on facilities and the environment, and that will expand into food service and transportation. Teaching and learning, that's the instructional aspect of it with our 5 schools. And then obviously the social emotional health related issues. I've earmarked a couple of organizational people who help facilitate those groups. They will not lead those groups per se, but help facilitate those groups. Both myself and Greg Goodwin, our director of facilities, will help in facilities and environment. We have one administrator on board, Mr. Ward, the principal at FES, who will help facilitate the teaching and learning along with all the other instructors. I have not assigned parents or community members to different groups, and certainly will take advantage of expertise within the organization. We have some real talented people not only representing themselves and families as parents, but because of their professional expertise, will certainly offer a lot of value to that piece. And obviously Paula Mueller, our nurse leader for the district, high school nurse, will help facilitate where we stand as it relates to health and social emotional issues as it relates to the reopening of school. So when I look at the steps in the process for this group, and we'll certainly have an opportunity for some question and answer and dialogue today, but as I said, I don't think the meeting, until we see where that state guidance is. We anticipated when I started this process over a month ago, having the state guidance. What I can tell you in conversation with the Commissioner of Education as late as this past Friday, the guidance is going to be very descriptive, comprehensive, and really give an outstanding roadmap to where all of our schools need to be. So we anticipate getting that document. You'll be getting that document. The good news for you is you didn't have a big homework assignment, even though I had multiple things that I was going to share with you prior to this first meeting. But from this point on, you can expect to be rolling up your sleeves in relation to kind of having that information. And if I have the information, I can assure you you'll have it. But most of what's going to take place from the state level will be kickstarted with the Governor Baker's announcement later this week. Like I said, as early as potentially as tomorrow. And then once we receive the guidance, we'll use that document to lead us to where we need to be. Any assumptions made prior to that are really just that. I'm going to really refrain from guidance as it relates to those pieces. But as you can see, some of the key things that we're going to have to take a look at, we're going to have to take a look at our projected enrollment numbers, pre-K to 12. We anticipate almost 2,900 students returning to us in the fall. Our school calendar is currently up there, a traditional calendar starting right before Labor Day. We may be taking a closer look at that as it looks towards starting school. And I think there's going to be multiple options as it relates to kind of where we're at to have our students return on site to our schools, which is our motivating factor as we move forward. We've included our transportation director, Mr. Resendiz, and Andrea Fay, our food service director, because obviously they become key components to the process in addition to instruction and learning. We're going to have to identify appropriate staff and responsibilities, including all the principals and teachers and paraprofessionals and custodians and everything. Just in that one step as it relates to identifying and purchasing necessary PPE, we've already started that process with the director of finance, with our director of facilities, with our head nurse, Paula Mueller, and with our director of student services. And we're looking to use the state model as it relates to what's going to be required. And then obviously we'll be looking at developing situational specific protocols, developing and implementing a training plan. And I'll be identifying some of the stakeholders that are part of this group to smaller subgroups that will branch out into looking at each of the schools, because as we look at the high school, we might be looking at it a little differently than middle school, and certainly our 3 elementary schools, the intermediate school, 4th and 5th grade, in addition to our pre-K and K to 3 elementary schools, Assawamsett and Freetown. So as best I could, let me actually bounce back if I may. I think we've got everybody here. Renee, I don't mind if you want to unmute, or we can use the chat mechanism. I think we have, it looks like about 30 individuals, and unless I get feedback, I'm assuming everybody's going to hear me okay. I want to be able to allow some task force members the opportunity to either ask questions or begin. As I stated earlier, this first session was going to focus on what the guidance looked like as it relates to the state. I do have some insight in as it relates to what it is going to be. And I'm real confident that this group, in addition to working with administrators, can put together a safe plan in the next 9 to 10 weeks as we prepare for a rollout in the fall. So, you know, I think unfortunately, I didn't want to postpone the meeting and keep pushing this out because I think there were more questions out there and there's a real anxiety level as it relates to kind of where we're at. We do have a school committee meeting this week, Wednesday night. I'll give an update to them. At that point, I think actually the guidance may have already been produced. As I said, if I get that guidance in advance, this task force will be shared that, and obviously then the community at large will you know, provide that. I think what is important to note is Freetown-Lakeville is not going to be able to deviate from what we are understanding, where the medical professionals, where the health professionals, where the educational professionals in the school, in the district, as in the state are done. So I think it's important to kind of see what those parameters are before we leap into kind of what we believe is the safest route for our students at all levels. But I am encouraged and excited as we finish up our last week of remote learning. These last few months have been a struggle for individuals, and I really applaud the teaching staff, the administrators, the parents, and the community who have really raised the bar in relation to kind of learning and teaching here in certainly our two towns, and I'm proud of where we're at. But at the same token, I'm hearing loud and clear that I think the best case scenario would be obviously to have our students return to us in the fall, as long as we think it can be done in a safe way. And what I have seen as far as the superintendent of schools relative to what the commissioner has shared and what the governor is going to share is the state has a extremely comprehensive plan as it relates to, and there'll be some testing and they'll be taking a look at how prepared we are as a district before we roll anything out in the fall. So whether it be on the chat or whether it just be individuals, I did want to offer you the opportunity because I think some people that whether it be parents and or educators and or administrators may feel you guys have the inside track, and I want to assure you that you have as much information as I have. I do have some insight into conversations with the commissioner, obviously, but we've been asked to hold on information as it relates to the public until the governor makes his announcement this week. But having said that and prefaced it, I'd be happy to answer any questions. We do have a school committee member representative here, Sherry Barron, and we also have Derek Grasha, who was a school committee member just up until recently, and is going to be a community member here. So I don't know if either of them would like to comment or if anybody would like to chime and jump in. If there's something that I can critically answer now, I'd love to do so. I do see a hand. Go ahead.
Is that me, Rick?
Yeah, Derek, go ahead.
So a couple of questions. One being the meeting time and the meeting orientation. My opinion, it's best for us to be in the schools in some social distancing effort so we could see what we're dealing with when those guidelines come out.
Yeah.
I'm not sure everybody in here. Obviously, we have some people who have been in the schools, but I think it'd be important for us to get an understanding and a visual of what some of these items we're talking about. The time of the meeting, 3 o'clock, is tough for me. So I didn't know if there was any, I could put that out there for the group and see if there was a time we could just push it back a little bit. And the other thing is there any, you know, based on the, you know, I don't have a lot of confidence in the state coming up with guidelines and not changing it 5 times before September. So, you know, to eliminate all the effort of this group, we're going to go and, you know, make some recommendations or come up with a plan based on the state, only for them to have 4 or 5 revisions. You know, our work may be all for naught in the beginning. So any sense to how the state's going to, you know, handle that?
Yeah. So Derek, I can, first of all, I think the 2 points that you bring up about the timing and the location and the format for the meeting, I think we need to get some consensus from the membership, and maybe I can email everybody with that. I certainly could push it to later in the day. We could have a 6:30 meeting, for example, like we've done for some evening sessions. I do know we have families and things to deal with. I have no problem doing that. And I do think the idea of as long as we can do it with social distancing and masks and within places, there are certainly locations within schools. We could start out, for example, at the high school cafeteria and certainly have a very face-to-face meeting. I think keeping all the safeguards in place. And to your point, as far as locations, obviously, logistically, you want to see what those classrooms look like. And when you start to look at structures and space and so forth. So I think to Derek's point, so for the meeting, I don't disagree. We probably should look at a potentially a later meeting start and also location. As far as where the state goes, I hear you loud and clear. I've been doing this for 31 years. And I would say under most circumstances, I would not necessarily say we should all sit in our hands and wait for the state to roll out what's happening. But what I can tell you is behind the scenes and what has been shared with us to date, the document that we're going to receive is going to be very prescriptive and directive in relation to what the health professionals and what educators are saying are in the best interest of kids. So I have some renewed confidence. But when that guidance comes out, I'll share it with you, and I think you'll be able to see what I mean by that. I think too much work done before that would be really, because I know, I mean, let's be honest, we've all heard some of the models, examples, right? We've heard everything from a full-blown traditional school, everybody just coming back, to some sort of hybrid model where kids are in halfway and partly out, and then obviously, full remote once again. What I can tell you is that without giving away too much information, the model is very specific in relation to what the expectations are for each of the schools, and they're going to be tested. And so I think by the time we have our next scheduled meeting, that you'll have a document that will provide a very good roadmap for not only our district, but most of the Commonwealth. So, and that probably contradicts what many have experienced in the past in relation. Those of you that have close experience to Rhode Island kind of saw a similar model rolled out with their state just recently through the governor and then through the commissioner. So I do have some, I have similar reservations, but having had a little bit more background information than you folks have, feel confident that what we're going to receive is going to be much more detailed and comprehensive than maybe we have received in the past relative to guidelines, Derek, to your point. Other comments or questions? Renee, do you see others? And Davis, jump in. Just if you, for some, I apologize.
Hello.
I did introduce some of you. If you don't mind, just again, since I didn't give you a formal intro, when you speak, you just kind of introduce yourself and whether you want to call yourself a parent first and foremost, or a teacher, or whatever it may be. And
Which hat am I putting on right now? All right. So I'm a parent of a Free Laker. I'm a teacher. I'm a union rep. I'm a Pitt taxpayer, which is why I felt like it was really important to be on this committee. So thank you, Rick, for picking me. Just a couple of questions that, are just kind of going through my mind as we're talking about this. And, as a mentor too, to a first-year teacher, Rick, how's our budget looking?
Yeah.
Because I know that there's going to be things coming out where, more than what we would typically be expected to fund. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, great question. And so for this task force and everybody within the community, what I can say to you is that our budget for FY20, we are concluding in very good shape in relation to some savings that we have had as a result of the pandemic, right? We've saved some significant monies in transportation services. And so as we go from 20 to 21, we had our budget approved at town meeting in Freetown on Saturday in the blazing sun on the football field. And we're hoping to have a unanimous, by the way, supported by both the Board of Selectmen and Finance, unanimously by the residents of Freetown. We have to have that same experience tomorrow night. We already have had the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee in Lakeville support that. They have their town meeting. Having said that, though, and to your point, and I think where you're kind of hinting at, there are going to be some additional costs that are going to be incurred as it relates to health services for students and buying some things. We do have some mechanisms in place. Both towns have CARES grant funding monies that we will take advantage of. And so I don't see right now, and you guys can quote me on this in the first meeting, but I don't see that there being cost prohibitive measures as it relates to what the model is going to look like that should not allow us to provide a safe return for our kids. So how's that for a quick answer? You can hold me to that right now.
No, that's great. Because like I said, we all know that, the state comes out with mandates and yet they're not funded. So, it is a tightrope that we walk. So.
Yeah, a great question. And absolutely what I didn't build into that is obviously I don't expect this task force to deal with the finances. That my office will handle that piece as it relates to what's necessary. At the end of the day, this group is going to guide us and help the administrators make sure that our kids and staff can safely return to school. And we need to be sure that it's not cost prohibitive to do that. And I'm confident based on what 20 and 21 looks like, in addition to some monies that are available through the towns and the state, that we can do that. We can make those necessary purchases.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Great question, Ann. I don't see chat per se. Let me see if I got anything here. No questions. I see.
Paula Mueller has her hand up, but she's muted. So she'll have to
Okay.
unmute.
Thanks, Renee. Paula, you're up.
Okay, can you hear me?
Absolutely.
So one of the things I just wanted to just bring up, and I don't know what the state's going to do. Hopefully this will be in the guidance, but just thinking about attendance and stuff like that, and just thinking about all the things, you know, we always try to encourage good attendance with kids, obviously, but this is going to be a little bit different this year. We're going to want to tell people, like, if your kid is sick, they need to stay home. So I think we need to think about all those things, you know, just kind of keep this in the back of your mind that we do as a school district. Like, I've heard people say, like, gee, maybe you ought to drop those rewards for good attendance that kids really try hard to get, because we really don't want to push anything that's going to encourage people to send their kids to school when they're sick. So I just want everybody to kind of keep that in the back of their mind about attendance may be different, and all those incentives to come to school, we might have to rethink all those.
Yeah, Paul, what I can tell you and what we've been told is that's going to be very specific in the guidance. The state is already backing off of one of the criteria for schools performance has always been, right? We need students in school, and we've all agreed with that. But they also recognize, to Paula's point, that the health professionals are saying, listen, we need to have some common sense approach here. And the commissioner has assured us that they are going to back off of that position and allow the health professionals to make judgment calls. And obviously we're going to be counting on parents and family members to keep students home, if in fact, you know, that more so than ever as it relates to health. And so we can't penalize individuals for making the right choice, the safe choice, as it relates to not only themselves and their families, but all kids. But we're going to have to emphasize that. We've been told, again, tough meeting when I'm saying, yes, wait till you see this guidance, and everyone's kind of waiting to see, but it's the truth. And Paula, I can tell you the commissioner that question was raised by multiple superintendents in our conference call with him on Friday. And he emphasized the fact that we're going to have to be very flexible relative to the number of school days, relative to attendance, and relative to testing and all those things, to be sure that, in fact, we put our kids and staffs in the best situation and the safest situation. But I will say it was very encouraging, and I do feel that the state is making a concerted effort to transition our kids back to school in the fall in the safest way we can. We've got a couple of busy months ahead of us, I will say, for the summer, and this group specifically, not to overwhelm you, but certainly you'll be part of that process. There'll be administrators and principals involved. But Paul, great question. They've hit it head on. We have a nice representative group here, right? We have some doctors, we have some health professionals, we have some counselors, and so I think we're well represented. And there's a cadre of other people who expressed interest both in the organization and through letters of interest that I think would provide some benefit and resources for us.
Rick,
Sherry,
was anything mentioned about like, you know, being lenient with staff too? Because like, again, like I'm a teacher and I'm a parent of 2 small children. So most of my sick days honestly go because my kids are sick, not because I'm sick.
Yeah, so Ann, similarly, I think there were as many questions about staff returning. Staff members, for example, if our kids are returning, that either are compromised and or that potentially might be at risk, and you know, that whole issue as it relates to their attendance, in addition to the day-to-day grind. But I think there's certainly a heightened recognition as it relates to both staff and students. And at the end of the day, I think we've all prided ourselves, and we're going to do what's the safest approach for our kids. But at the same token, I think we all recognize that, in fact, if we can have our kids return to school in a safe environment, that would be the best situation. And certainly it's what I was encouraged to hear the state say, is they believe that they have a plan and a roadmap that works for us all. Sherry, I don't mean to put you on the spot representing all the school committee, but I certainly know you were You wear multiple hats, kind of like Ann, as a former educator yourself. And I don't know if you have any comments as it relates to today's kickoff meeting.
No, I'm glad that you, I agree with Paula, and I'm glad that you explained the attendance policy. I think the people need to understand that that really comes from the state, and we're rated on our attendance. So the fact that the 98% attendance in the schools helps us on our rating. Can you kind of explain that rating in the past? And it's good to know it's going to be relaxed.
Yeah, so Sherry, you make a real point just for those other individuals who sit there. And when you see the Mr. Wards of the world, I see Mike sitting here representing the administrators, right? We've made a concerted effort to really highlight what a great job we've done with attendance. And much of that has been driven by how the state rates our schools. They're basing it on percentage of participation. Obviously, they want kids in schools. But they also now recognize that we cannot be forcing students that are ill to come to school, and we need to be aware of the circumstances. And what we've been told is that rating is going to be backed off dramatically. They did, and in fairness to the state, they did so in March, right? They immediately recognized that, in fact, as we started to hit this first wave, that we certainly couldn't take attendance into account. And I think there's been a general trend moving away from things such as perfect attendance recognition anyways, I think, and I think we're going to have to continue down that path. I think we obviously want to see our kids in school and learning, and but at the same token, it needs to be safe. So Sherry, great point. I think we'll have to do a better job of that as it relates to making sure parents understand that we want the kids to be in school, but we also want them to be in the best situation they can be in first, from a health perspective. Sherry, anything else? I don't mean to put you on the spot as school committee, but we have, we're Board of Health represented by each towns, multiple people here. Any of the other teachers? I'd love to give you some insight. I've got some, so this is one of those situations, those of you that know me personally, professionally, I'm dying to roll out with some information that I have as it relates to kind of where we're at. I shared some insight with the leadership team. And, but what I can say to you is this week, there's going to be a ton of pertinent information that this group is going to want to wrap themselves around, read closely. And I am encouraged by what we've heard to date at the administrative level, superintendent's level, with the commissioner and ultimately through the governor. It is my understanding the governor, potentially as early as tomorrow, will release some of this information, as obviously we're in part two, phase two of the state reopening. But I'd be happy to, I'm trying to dance around some of the answers as it relates, but I am concerned that I felt if we canceled this meeting, I do know there are a lot of parents that are anxious and thinking we're just going to roll back out to remote learning and that we're not returning. That is not the indication I'm receiving from the state. I think it obviously has to be part of any model that exists, right? We have to be prepared, not knowing what's going to happen in 3 or 6 months, but it's certainly not the intent. Other items, task force members that jumped in? And we're just about a half hour. I figured this meeting may be anywhere between a half hour and 45 minutes, only because we don't have documents in place. I had a couple of handouts I was going to share with you, but I thought I'd be remiss to kind of share those with you before the state rolled out their info.
Derek has his hand up.
Derek,
yeah, Rick, there may be some, I know we did surveys in the district of students and our parents and teachers. Some of that information may be resourceful to this group when it comes to the teaching and learning area of the subcommittee. So if any of that is a resource to this committee, which I think there were some questions in there, that may be helpful for the committee to see.
Yes, I think great point. So, what was our experience like in remote learning? We are looking at technology devices. I don't mean to jump all over the place with this group, but we are looking at securing additional devices for our kids in the event that we have to have subcapacity to take a look at that. I'm anticipating some people might have questions about, what's the bus going to look like and those circumstances. We've been told that all of that detail will be provided. But to Derek's point, we certainly have surveyed staff. We have certainly surveyed parents. I believe we had over 600 responses. We're going to take a look at our special education group as well this summer and see if we can drill down a little bit deeper and hear from them specifically. And there is a wealth of information, to Derek's point, that should lead us to make some informed decisions about whether it be a hybrid model, whether it be remote learning, or things that we can do to improve the experience for families. But again, I don't want anyone to be led down a path that we're looking at a blended model. I don't think that's what you're going to be seeing later this week. I think you're going to see a concerted effort by the state to see our students come back to school and with all the necessary safeguards. Other items or questions, Renee? I don't know if you see anybody else
I see
that has their.
Davis's hand up.
Sorry, just to clarify, Rick, when you say blended model, are you talking half, like remote and in the classroom?
Yeah, so I think early on the process, and there's been a lot of conversation, most likely anecdotally throughout the state, that what we're going to see is kids kind of half on, half off, going part-time. And I think there was a genuine concern about class size. What I will say is that a lot of new information relative to from medical professionals and educators are leaning or moving a little bit away from that model. So
Okay, good. Because again, as a parent, it's like, oh my God, how am I going to do both at the same time? You know?
So the good news is I'm asking you to kind of patiently sit tight a couple more days, finish up remote learning strong. I know you're kind of dying to see this document, as am I to see. I have a little bit more insight as superintendent. What I'm sharing with you is please don't be that anxious that the state doesn't have, and thus ultimately Free Lake doesn't have a plan. I'm convinced that what we have been told to date is doable, is safe, is affordable, and it's going to be a ton of work. How's that on top of it? I will say that I'd be lying to you to be sure that we can put 5 schools in place and put our kids there. We may be tweaking transportation. We may have to, take a look at how we're doing food service as it relates to being safe for kids. I think we're going to have to survey parents, to Derek's point, in this summer about transportation and where parents fit into that. I think what I'd like this group to do is we're going to be taking pictures of classrooms when those diagrams and models come out to show you what a classroom looks like at the elementary level, at the intermediate level, at the middle school and high school. So you can see and parents can see firsthand, this is what the classroom will look like in 2021 as we move forward if and when your students return to school. And we may have to make some minor adjustments with our calendar is what So if you guys keep me on for about 20 more minutes, I probably can spill the beans on most of which the governor and the commissioner has shared. Not the best poker player here, but I'm trying to give some insight into seriously what I think is, where everybody is real anxious right now, right? I think everybody has really done all they could possibly do relative to remote learning from March to June. We've learned a lot. I've been so proud of what everybody's done. And I think people are exhausted by it when I get some emails at this point as it relates. So I'm hoping people can recharge this summer and feel confident that we've got a collective group here that's going to work their tails off for them to be sure that our kids can return to us in the fall in a safe place.
Shauna Fontaine has a question.
Shauna, go ahead.
Hi.
Shauna, you're breaking up a little bit on me. I don't know about anybody else.
Yeah, I can't hear her. Let me see.
Sean, I want to try that again, or at least even put it in a chat if it's brief.
Is there information that's okay to share? How would you like us to go moving forward?
Shauna, can you repeat that again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, you lose me. Sorry. I'm looking to talk a little bit about confidentiality within the task force.
Yes.
So are you looking for these meetings to be completely confidential? Are there certain items that are okay to share? Is everything confidential? I think that needs to be.
Yeah, that's first of all a great question that maybe I should have been clear about. These are public meetings. They're an offshoot of the school committee really thinking it was a great idea to facilitate a group of individuals that can communicate. So we're going to be real transparent, Shauna. We are going to be open about everything we're sharing. Most of the documents, if not all the documents, will be public documents and be readily available. I don't think the average parent wants to read through a 45-page document, though. So we're going to do some of the legwork for parents and teachers and educators. And yet, at the same token, you're wearing your counselor hat. we have to be, we have to certainly make sure that we're not compromising confidentiality as it relates to transporting children and different circumstances that may come. But the main focus of this group is a guiding group that will help facilitate what the state framework looks like for our schools for the fall. It will not, if there's a smaller subgroup, Shauna, that breaks down and looks at some counseling components to that, then we can do that internally as a district. And what I would say to the group is listen, I don't think that's within your purview. We're going to take that up as administrators to deal with that. But I hope that answered your question. I hope that answered it for the community.
Yes,
We will
definitely.
post these meetings publicly, and certainly let anybody enter in. I mean, I think we have 32 participants, so we've had a few more people join us today. I think the time frame. I am curious to see. Do we have a thumbs up, thumbs down on 3 o'clock? Should we go to later meeting time frame? Any? Well, and how about how comfortable are people? If I were to schedule a meeting in our high school cafeteria, can you guys be candid and honest? Are we prepared with social distancing and masks? Do we think it would be a more productive session if we can do that? Thumbs up. I see thumbs up. I listen. I'm challenged. Some of you educators, some of my teachers, I'm so impressed by how great they've done on Zoom and some of this. I'm a little challenged with that. So sometimes I think it's challenging to get everybody's input in these sessions. And I appreciate some of you just sitting there, kind of like quietly, patiently taking it in. But I do think if we met on site and then maybe in the subgroups, even to get even one step further, right? Those smaller subcommittees could meet in groups of 5, 6, or 7. And certainly socially distanced, mask. We could have hand sanitizers available and kind of do that. I don't want anybody to do something, though. There are individuals, myself included, who haven't done a lot of things out in the public with a vast number of people. And I don't want anybody to put anybody in a situation they're not comfortable with. But I do think the most productive means might be to have a little bit later time frame and provide a little more flexibility. But I'll send something out later this week. And hopefully get some feedback through email if that works.
Paula Mueller had a question.
Paula?
My suggestion was just going to be, I was trying to put it into chat, but it was just taking me too long to type it. I was going to suggest that, and I agree with what Derek said about, I think what Derek was getting at more was actually looking at the schools, not necessarily like meeting live. I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but
Yeah.
like looking at the schools to see what we're looking at. But I was thinking that it might be good to have our next meeting on Zoom after we look at the guidelines, whatever time that is, take a really deep dive into the guidelines when we get them this week, really read them and be able to discuss them when we come together. And then I think after that, we'll have a better idea of how we should approach it. Like, hey, maybe we all need to go to these schools and see what it's going to look like.
Paula, I think you hit, first of all, I think you're absolutely correct. Derek was referencing the fact that I think not that we need to physically be together as a meeting group, but that we may actually need, from a logistic perspective, need to go see what the middle school, what they're up against as it relates to obstacles and the different schools, because obviously they vary. I actually like the idea of maybe our next meeting, since we haven't even seen guidance, give you opportunity to read a document and come back together and then kind of, have a 4th of July break and kind of roll up the sleeves and have about 8 or 9 weeks to get prepared for the start of school. I think we could probably accomplish that. And then we can decide. Paula, I've asked you and Mike and Greg Goodwin and myself to kind of facilitate that. There may be some tasks that involve a smaller group going to Assawamsett or Freetown Elementary School and taking a look at classroom and hall corridors, and see how students will look traffic flow wise when they come back and what the expectations are. But I think those are great and valid points. Renee, am I missing anybody?
Ann Davis just wants to know that if we do have a meeting in person, is there an option to join remotely? Will we have that option?
Yeah, I think we can. I think as much as I think I hear people getting together, I think you're thinking to get together for the working group. I think we could probably do maybe our next meeting remote and have it a little bit later for folks. and that hopefully will accommodate some family commitments and professional commitments. Maybe, in fact, it might involve more people from the public. I'm guessing as the documents come out and the guidance comes out from the state, whether it be from the governor's office or the commissioner's office, there'll be more and more individuals who will probably be joining us in trying to gain some information. But I think we can probably go next Monday remote, maybe push it back several hours. Hopefully between now and then, I am forwarding a document and or guidance information that will lead us into some real valuable conversations for next steps.
Kenny
It was my
Resendiz
only
has a question.
Who's that, Renee?
Ken Resendiz. He just needs
Kenny.
to unmute himself.
Ken, you just need to unmute yourself and you can go. So for those, Kenny?
Yeah, you there? Yep.
Yep.
Hi,
Hello
folks.
there, sir.
Eric, thank you for your years of service. My question, Rick, based on returning back to school this year, would the district potentially entertain students boarding 5 days per week from the same stop consistently, where we think there's going to be potential change?
Yeah, so that's a real specific question, Kenny. That's a valid one and legitimate one. I think we're going to have to look long and hard at what parameters we have relative to how many students can be on a bus. What are the safeguards? I think we need to provide some consistency. I think we need to reach out to families to see who's going to do that. I think we need to look at the schedule. I think we need to see who's, what students. So that's not me copping out on answering that question, Ken, because I think it's a legitimate question. It just shows this group, though, and parents that are part of this group, the magnitude behind the work that needs to be done this summer, right? I mean, that's just one example, a very valid, good example of how are we going to safely transport 2,900 students, to school in 2 months' time. And so I do, but I think it's doable, Ken. I'm not dancing around the answer. I think it absolutely has to be a factor considered where we've provided flexibility relative to daycare. I think what you're hearing from health professionals, and we'll see in the document that we're going to receive, is that obviously cohorts of individuals and consistency when you're moving different kids and trying to minimize potential contact exists. And I'd rather have you read that from health professionals than me certainly pretend to do that. But Kenny, you're part of this process because I think you offer some real insight from a transportation perspective where we need to be. Thanks.
Appreciate you having me.
Other final items before we wrap up or conclude this afternoon? I know I really didn't take a consensus, but I think generally speaking, I think we're probably looking at maybe a 6:30 remote meeting next week, hopefully with the situation where you have been provided with a document or multiple documents to review to provide some insight. Does that work for most folks? Thank you. I see thumbs up, response. For those of you that know me personally and professionally, I can give you my cell phone number. I check my email. You won't catch me on Twitter or Facebook, truth be told, right? But other than that, you can get a hold of me pretty quick. So if you have some insight or questions for me or some suggestions between now and next week, email me, call me, text me, share it, and we'll. One of the things I think Shauna Fontaine pointed out, I think, and did it real nicely, and I appreciate her bringing that up, is we need to be very transparent and do a phenomenal job of communicating why whatever we're rolling out, we feel so strongly about it that it makes sense for our kids in both Freetown and Lakeville, and that it's safe. Because at the end of the day, I do think there are going to be some individuals who, regardless of the model, may not be comfortable with that. And I think one thing I don't want to be in the position to do is say, yeah, I just wasn't informed about that. So, Sarah, did I see your hand up for a question? I didn't mean to put you on the spot there. So no, okay.
Miss Cummings had a question.
Oh, okay. Yep. Erica.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Rick, for all of this information and for meeting with us all today. So I am a mom of 3 kids. I have 2 in the high school and 1 in the elementary going over to Gray's Intermediate this coming fall. And I had a question in regards to what what you're about to receive in regards to the guidance without sharing any insight that you have. Are you able to send us that information once it's released and what the document looks like before next meeting so that we can all have the opportunity to kind of read through it and kind of pinpoint where, we have questions or thoughts or comments or anything so that we can kind of be ahead of the game for the meeting next week if it's released?
That, Erica, to answer your question, that is absolutely my expectation. If I have a document that is a public document that's shared, and I believe it will be from the state, as soon as I have that information, I will share it with you. I will say this, for some of you, maybe not some of the educators or administrators, I think it's going to be an overwhelming document, and I may just ask, parents to take a look. But to Erica, to your point, if we're going to make our next session productive, obviously you need to have that information prior so you had an opportunity to review it. So what I will say to you is, if you don't have that document by Thursday or Friday, it's because I don't have that document. But that my intention is to certainly share what I can share. And if I feel it should be broken down, my experience has been, and Sherry, Derek, Field, jump in. I think there has to be a trust and a transparency in this process. And I am reluctant to pick and choose what I think is important from the information that's being released, because I think it can feel like we're keeping some of the information out of the hands of parents. And so, Erica, it is my intent to make sure that you have the document or that you have pertinent information prior to in advance of our next meeting.
Okay, and one more quick question for you. So the way that the guidelines are going to be, coming out with all of their recommendations, just my background is actually in pediatric medicine for 22 years, and I am equally concerned about these students, many of their mental health, to be honest. And so my question is, in regards to what they set out, is it basically just, for example, okay, you have to have your just random thought that you have to have 10 kids per class, and now you have to have 30 classes instead of 10 classes, right? Let's just say that.
Yep.
Is there room for movement? Like when you get a recommendation, if it's 43 pages long, you have to basically, are you having to follow every single piece by a T? Is that what's happening?
Yeah. So, Erica, what they've shared with us, without going too much into but the example you gave, is that we've been told about 85 to 90% will be prescriptive, and there will be some latitude and local discretion relative to 10 or 15% to adjust accordingly to what best meets your individual school needs and district needs. So I don't think it's going to be so restrictive that we don't have some local flavor to what we can do. The state realizes that, some communities have more capacity than others, for example, and they're different populations and so forth. So what we've been told and what they've shared to date does lead me to believe that there is more direct information being shared from health professionals as it relates to primarily students ages 5 to 18. There's a lot of data and research, and I see some head nods from some people who know far more than me in the health field and the professional field, that really has sent a message home to the educators and the administrators at DESE where they think we can take our kids in a safe way. But Erica, I do think there's going to be enough guidance, but not so restrictive that we can't make some discretionary decisions at the community level.
That's great. Thank you.
Renee, did I miss anybody else?
Not that I can see.
It's a good graduate, as I say, it's a good graduate level class. At the very tail end, even if you have a question, you don't ask the professor, you kind of sit tight and say, I'll ask him offline. But I'm available. We've kept this meeting to just under an hour. I think we'll be the first of what I hope will be very productive sessions. I am so thankful that you folks have committed your time and efforts. And certainly you need to know that the information that you're going to be able to share, you'll be able to share with colleagues, whether it be you're a classroom teacher, whether you're a parent in a PTO, because we need to do what's best for our kids in a safe environment. And we'll be reporting out to the school committee on Wednesday. Our next school committee meeting is Wednesday night at 6:30. It is a remote meeting. And then we meet, we've actually scheduled a couple of summer meetings. So I think more than ever, we're going to have to be sure that the roadmap that we lay out for our kids is done in such a way that parents feel very comfortable in both communities adhering to what we're asking them to do. So thank you. We'll go. It looks like I'm seeing from the chat, 6:30 seems to work for most folks, and we'll do it with a remote. And hopefully by next Monday, you will have had the opportunity in multiple days to review some information relative to kind of the next steps in the process. Have a great afternoon, folks. Thank you. Again, reach out to me if you need to. Thank you so much for supporting me and the district. And we thank you, and stay tuned. Have a great afternoon.